This episode is brought to you by Cadillac. When you have 4 new tires, every drive feels fresh. Right now, buy 3 select tires and get 1 for just $1 during the Cadillac Certified Service Fresh Start Tire event. Visit Cadillac.com/service offers or see dealer for full details. At participating U.S. GM dealers only. Highest or equal value tire will be $1. Offer ends 5/31/2025. Not available with other offers.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. This is The Other Side of Midnight, and we've been chatting about, really since it occurred, about this horrible Washington, D.C. airline disaster. There's so much interest. There are so many different theories as to what happened, the role of the helicopter pilot, the role of the air traffic controller. Obviously, the comments from President Trump regarding DEI have added a whole other level of intrigue. The thoughts about what's going on in terms of staffing, in terms of what theories might emerge, including a suicide on the part of the helicopter pilot. We spoke with John Nance yesterday, who I thought was very insightful. He didn't seem to put much stock into the theory regarding suicide and didn't seem to give Donald Trump's comments regarding DEI much credence either. Someone who is one of the only people that I've ever spoken to that understands this question and the issues involved firsthand is Elizabeth McCormick. She is a decorated former U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter pilot who flew command and control air assault, top secret intelligence missions, and also transported high-level government VIPs, including the Secretary of Defense. Elizabeth, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me.
I'm happy. Well, I'm here. It's been a hard week to say happy.
I can imagine. Elizabeth, what was your reaction initially when you first heard about what occurred?
Well, at first they were saying it was a police helicopter. Mm-hmm. And so, I still was watching, just spellbound wanting to know what happened and more details as they emerged. And then it came out very quickly that it was a U.S. Army Black Hawk, and my heart just sunk.
So here we are almost a week later, and there's still a lot of questions. In terms of the investigation itself, what are we waiting on here? Are we waiting on the analysis of the black box, and are we waiting on, determining from both perspectives, both the helicopter perspective and the airplane perspective, what went wrong? Where does an investigation go from here?
So you've got multiple different layers in the investigation. You've got the physical evidence, which is the aircraft and retrieving everything from the river, drawing it out, laying it out, piecing it out, and then inspecting everything. And there's a reason they say this in totality could be up to a year before all the findings are released. I'm most anxious to hear is the voice recorder, because we don't know why the helicopter was off altitude. We don't know why they appeared to fly straight into there. I have some theories of what could happen in a training flight that would cause that. We can talk about that, but we won't know definitively until we hear that voice recorder. Some questions I have: who was on the controls? Which pilot was on the controls? What were they doing in training modes? Were they simulating emergencies because they thought they were clear? Did they actually have both CRJs that were in their field of view, one that was taking off, you saw that in the first video, and there was the one descending? Did they have both in their field of view when the air traffic controller only mentioned one? I don't think they had the second one that was descending that they hit. I think they only saw the one. What about, do they have their night vision goggles down? If they had their night vision goggles down, that would affect their, especially looking up, and scanning up, that would create a big barrier visually as well as the rotor system there. So did they have their night vision goggles down or are they up? That might be on the voice recorder. You would typically say, we're going to go goggles. It's bright here with the airport. We're going to go goggles up. And they would have that communication inside the cockpit. If they don't have that communication, that might, again, have to come from the physical evidence of the condition of their helmets.
You mentioned the goggles situation. This is something that I thought not at all about before what occurred. And I've been reading a lot of the news reports of what went on in terms of these goggles. So we know that the Black Hawk was equipped with night vision goggles. How do those impact visibility in general and depth perception? We were talking with John Nance yesterday, and he said that his read, based on what the air traffic controller folks were saying, is that they thought maybe the Black Hawk helicopter had misunderstood what aircraft the air traffic controller tower was referring to. Do the Black Hawk vision, the night vision goggles on the Black Hawk, do they play a role in that at all?
Yes. If they had the night vision, actually, whether they have them on or off could have been a factor. If they had the night vision goggles, if they had them down, I want you to imagine you are looking through 2 toilet paper rolls about that same length. How much vision do you have up? How much vision do you have? You have to physically move your head and to scan. You can't just use your eyes because your eyes are looking through those goggles. So there is a little bit of depth, but it's more of an issue of field of view. So what you can see in order to see, they were high. I mean, 100 feet or so is not that much when you're on the ground, although it was a hard ceiling they should have been paying attention to. If they actually were high, then while you're in night vision goggles, you're not only looking through the goggles to see outside the aircraft, but when you look inside the aircraft, you have to look down underneath the goggles and tilt your head up to see what's going on inside in your gauges. So there's just a whole lot going on. And then it limits your field of view. And then adding to that, I believe that only having one crew chief having a crew of 3, 2 pilots and a crew chief is a minimum crew. Having 2 crew chiefs in the back is an optimal crew. So having that extra crew chief that would help scanning potentially could have prevented this from happening as well.
So what's your best guess as to what happened here and why it happened?
I think it's a combination, as most aviation incidents are. I think it's a combination of potentially 5 things or more. The 5 things are, one is they could have had another crew member in there for visibility in a crowded airspace corridor on a night vision goggle mission, a training mission. They could have. I think that should be a policy change that requires that. The second is the altitude. Something was wrong there. And then we're coming to find out that there was actually a discrepancy in air traffic control as to their heights. They were showing different heights at the point of impact. So that means something between the aircraft that would be mechanical, that could be computer error. I'm honestly have no idea on that. It could be a calibration issue. I have no idea on what could have caused that. And they've already said that they are looking at that very closely. Whether the pilots were in a training mode. So what happens when you're doing an evaluation like this with an instructor pilot is if you think you're clear, which if they thought they had visual separation from the one aircraft and didn't know about the descending jet, and they thought they were in clear space, the instructor pilot and the co-pilot would say, okay, we're going inside the aircraft to simulate an emergency and talk through a potential emergency. That's part of an annual proficiency evaluation. And so they might have been inside the aircraft at that point, and that's why it didn't deviate and flew into that. It might be if they were on goggles, when they did finally see the aircraft come down, it whited out their goggles so much they couldn't react in time because they were that close. Those are questions we won't know until we get that voice recording and the transcript out. The third item is air traffic control not being clear in their communications. From what I've always experienced is they say, do you have visual on the aircraft type at, for example, 2 o'clock high or 5 o'clock low, or, wherever that position is to help you find that other aircraft. If there were multiple aircraft, they should say there are multiple aircraft, and they did not do any of that based on the transcripts that have been released. So that is a concern and definitely a factor. And now we're finding out that they were short-staffed and only had one person monitoring 2 different stations that would normally be single stations. Fourth is the night vision goggles. We've already talked about that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then fifth is a radio situation. The frequency that the Blackhawks and the military used with tower is separate and different than what the airliner use. If they had been on the same frequency and monitoring the same frequency, would they have heard each other and been able to better deconflict and realize that other aircraft was coming in on approach?
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
How does PwC take your company to the leading edge? They bring the sharpest minds in tech to your team, so you can bring the ideas that will transform your business. They're passionate about your industry, so you can walk into any room with every advantage. And they're with you every step of the way, so you can know you're headed in the right direction. PwC builds for what's next, so you can get there now. Get started at pwc.com/us/leading edge.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
Some people have questioned why a helicopter training flight was happening during peak air traffic hours rather than at other times or even in this area at all. Is there a strong justification for having a Black Hawk helicopter in the vicinity of other aircraft at this time? And should it have been taking place, if it had to be in this sort of airspace, should it have been taking place at an alternative time?
So what alternative time, Frank?
I don't know. I don't know.
Honestly. So I saw the briefing you're talking about that with Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, and he had said that, well, maybe they should be doing this at 1 a.m. Helicopters are loud. Then we get noise complaints. When I was stationed in Germany, we weren't allowed to fly past midnight. If we flew past midnight, we got fined, because they're so loud and there's noise complaints. So with their, that's I'm sure that's a consideration. I'm sure there are some kind of on-base policies about how late you can fly and what you can do. So that will all have to be looked at procedurally and policy-wise as well.
One of the things that obviously has gotten a great deal of attention is President Trump's controversial remarks referencing DEI. I'm sure because you were a female Black Hawk helicopter pilot that you've been, asked about this from time to time, especially in the last week. What was your take on what the president said? Is there any truth to it?
If anything, as women and pilots that I know that are of color, we had to work harder than our white male counterparts. We had to perform higher. When I started Warrant Officer Candidate School to get to flight school, we started with 7 women and only 2 of us finished. They washed 5 out. And of the 2 of us that finished, we finished first and third in the class because you were either exceptional or you got sent home. They were looking for any reason to send the women specifically home. And with talking with pilots of color that they have said, it was the same for them as well. So I think the ones that are you're seeing fielded in units and flying missions are the best of the best because they had to be. So the DEI comment really doesn't hold water if you're saying they're not the right people or the most skilled for the job.
By the way, I've already learned a great deal about being a helicopter pilot just in the last few minutes. I appreciate you joining us. What kind of emergency protocols exist for military pilots to avoid civilian aircraft, especially in congested airspace?
So I've studied the charts. I haven't actually flown in the DC area. I was up in New York and flew from Fort Drum, would fly generals down to West Point, fly down the Hudson Bay into New York City. There are specific routes. There are specific altitudes that we're supposed to be at for these, just like in DC. The one in DC had you're supposed to be along the east side of the river. You're supposed to be below 200 feet. 200 feet was the ceiling, the maximum. So, and they're there for a reason. The idea is that this deconflicted space. I've been asked about the jet wash. When they're on approach, there's not as much jet wash. They're not revving the engines up for the thrust they need to take off. So jet wash isn't an issue as much, but it's been determined that it's, quote, safe, or that wouldn't be an existing published route. What we're finding out now is that there have been many close calls there. And in fact, a while back, there was a big push to close that airport. That's part of the reason they built Dulles, and to close that airport because it's a hazard with all the monuments and the Capitol so close and the White House. It's very close altogether there. And who owns and runs that airport? Do you know, Frank?
I don't.
It's federal. Congress.
So obviously, if it's federally run by Congress, and obviously when you have a situation where the federal government's in charge of anything, I would think there's a certain level of bureaucracy that's involved. What does that mean in terms of learning from this for the future, right? Do we expect changes in how military and civilian aircraft share airspace, particularly around a federally run airport?
Absolutely. I can see that coming out from the NTSB as one of their findings and recommendations, because it's their job to recommend policies to the Department of Transportation, the FAA, to implement those policies. Sometimes they're not always implemented and put in, but this is, I think, will be taken let's be clear, it will be taken extremely seriously because of the loss of life, what it was involved, and is so significant and tragic, and absolutely preventable. Because if any of those 5 things that I listed off, and there could be a mechanical issue too. There's something in the Black Hawk could have mechanically been wrong, and they were inside the helicopter focused on troubleshooting an actual emergency, not a training simulated emergency. I mean, we just don't know. Those are things that come out with the flight data recorder and the voice recorder.
I just have to ask you about this because so many people have brought this up. The speculation that the Black Hawk helicopter pilot might have somehow committed suicide, and that's why this occurred. Based on what you know, is there any indication that that's likely?
Absolutely not. There is no way. The level of pride, the level of patriotism, the level of, as a pilot, we're all in peak physical condition. We're psych eval'd once a year as part of this annual evaluation. Physical, in very deep invasive physical once a year. So there's no way that suicide, and besides that, there's a crew in there, and it would not have happened. The other crew members wouldn't have allowed it to happen. So there's no way that I see that happening. And let me just clarify. I'm sure that's stemming from all the data and the press and everything that we have put out there about veterans committing suicide.
Right.
It's coming from that. And I can see that would cause confusion for the average American, right? The reason veterans, there's a PTSD factor, but a main reason that veterans commit suicide is they get out of the military and they've lost their identity. When you're in the military, you have a unit. They provide your housing. You have a family. You become a family with the people you work with. You get out of the military, and that's all. It's like a grief. You've lost all that. And then so you've lost who you are. You're no longer a soldier or service member. And then you've lost your family, in your unit. And it can be very isolating. And then you layer in that some are struggling with PTSD and then maybe medical or physical issues as well. And that's why the suicide. And let's be honest, if a veteran wants to commit suicide, they have the lethality to know how to do it and accomplish it versus an average citizen. So when you factor all that in, I can see why the public's questioning that. I can also see, based on the video where the aircraft appears to fly straight in, but there is not a speck of doubt in me that this would happen with an active duty military crew. Especially, I've done some research on Captain Loback and what a patriot she was. She had a playlist called 1776. She was a true patriot. Of our country.
What a shame. What a shame. Elizabeth, obviously a tough discussion and about a very, very difficult time. I very much appreciate the conversation. And if people want to check out your books, there's several which people should check out. They've been very highly reviewed. They could just go to Amazon and type Elizabeth McCormick. That's McCormick. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
I hope I was able to shed some light on what is really a complicated, multi-layered tragedy.
I'm certain that you have. If you have comments or questions that you want to get on the air with, you can give me a call at 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.